How's it going, guys? It is Venom Surge here, and welcome back to another episode of Elder Scrolls Online. This is a series where we go over different sets and we try to make unique builds out of them. They may not be the best builds or viable in endgame content, but this is just for fun and seeing what we can do with the crappy sets in this game. Today's set is Radiant Bastion. This is a set that you can find in the Reach overlay in farming. You can buy this off of traders and or farm it yourself. The first piece gives you max health, spell damage, and weapon damage. Max health, and then deal 10% of all direct damage done to you back to the attacker, up to 4,250 damage. So this is a reflecting set. If you get hit by ads, this won't do as much, but to me, this looked more like a PvP option. Now, it's difficult to test PvP on PTS, which is what we're on right now. So currently on the real server, I'm working on leveling 18 characters, 3 of which are from each class, so that way I can do PvP builds on there. It will not have the entire setup properly because that is very expensive if I'm going to be doing this a lot, but it will give you guys a better idea of how the build works. So we are using this across the body. We are using all heavy. The big pieces are infused with the tri-stat enchant, and then the smaller pieces are impenetrable with the max health enchant. To match this kind of reflecting style, I wanted to try out another reflection set. So we are using Thews of the Harbinger. This is a set that you can get from the Telvar merchants in the Imperial City. You might want to swap this out to be the jewelry for Radiant Bastion rather than for Harbinger, but that's up to you. Harbinger gives you max health, max stam, and then when you block, you deal 2k physical damage to the attacker. This effect scales off your max health. We are using infused tri-stat recovery on all 3 of the jewelry, and then on the weapons, we are using a Oblivion enchant and a defending trait. We are using a tri-stat infused shield, and then on the back bar, we are using a restoration staff with a weapon damage enchant and powered trait. Since this is a PvP build, I wanted to get as much armor as possible and ulti regeneration, so I went with Blood Spawn. This is also heavy. This comes from Spindle Clutch 2. You can get this on Vet. It is a easier dungeon than some of the other Vet dungeons you can do. We are using both infused on the head and shoulders. This is infused tri-stat for this enchant, and impenetrable max health for this shoulder piece. Bloodspawn gives you stam recovery, and then when you take damage, you have a 6% chance to generate 13 ultimate, and increases your physical and spell resistance by 3.7k for 5 seconds. This can occur every 5 seconds. The idea here is when we take damage, we reflect 10% of that back. We can also be blocking the entire time to deal 2k back. The Harbinger doesn't matter what type of attack they do, whereas Radiant Bastion is based on direct damage, so you are a bit limited there, but it's a percentage. That also means if the person hitting you is very hard hitting, they're going to get hit very hard as well. And then Bloodspawn increases our survivability when we take damage. Now for our stats, this is what our stats are here. The main thing we want to look at is our max health is about 47k. Our recoveries are kind of decent. Our spell crit is at 2.5k. You could push this up higher if you'd want, but I did want to keep up some of our other survival stats as well. We are 64 attributes into max health, and we are using the Lady Munda Stone, and this is what we looked like buffed. Feel free to pause the video to look at the stats when you need. Now for our consumables, for the main food, I am using Orzaga's Smoked Bear Haunch. This gives us max health and then tons of recoveries. When I tested this build out, the main issue I struggled with was blocking, and so it's very nice to have that stam recovery. Even though the stam recovery is turned off when you're blocking, in PvP, you may not be blocking the entire time, you might be roll dodging and stuff, so it's nice to keep that stam recovery, and then the mag recovery is also very nice. You could also do Bewitched Sugar Skulls. This gives you tons of max pools and then health recovery, or you can just do the normal Crown Fortifying Meal, which is just giving you all 3 max pools. And then for the main potion, I'm just using the Tri-Stat potion. Now on to the skills. For the first skill, we're going into the one-handed shield, and we are using Heroic Slash. This does apply minor maim, which doesn't really matter as much because we want them to do a lot of damage, so we reflect it back onto them. But the main reason I use this is for the minor heroism, giving us one ultimate every 1.5 seconds for 12 seconds. Next up in the Draconic Power skill line, we are using Green Dragon Blood. When you pop this, you restore 34% of your missing health, and then you also gain major fortitude, major endurance, and minor vitality while the skill is active. Now note, the heal is based on your missing health, so if you're only missing 3k health, you're only gonna get about 1k of that. Whereas if you're almost dead and you pop this, you're going to get a third of your health back. So it's better when you're actually really low on health, which is why I also pushed for max health, which is also stacking with the Thews of Harbinger. Next up in the Undaunted skill line, this is another thing that is based on reflection. This is the Spiked Bone Shield. When you pop this, you gain a damage shield that absorbs 16.88k damage for 6 seconds, and it returns 100% of direct damage back to the enemy. Allies can also synergize and grant other allies a damage shield equal to 35% of their max health. So this should do a lot of damage as long as you're taking a lot of damage, and this will stack with your other sets that are reflecting damage. Next up in the Draconic Power line, we are using Dragon Fire Scale. When you activate this for Magicka, you reduce your damage taken from projectiles by 50% for 6 seconds, and then if you're hit with a projectile, you retaliate and launch a fiery orb that deals about 4k flame damage. It can occur every half second. This isn't a true reflect, the damage is based on our stats compared to what we're taking as a hit, but it kind of goes with a theme where they attack me and they get a returned attack. Next up in the Fighters Guild line, we are using Silver Leash. This is a stamina pole that you can use to bring in your enemies. That way they are forced to go into melee range, which will help with Thews of Harbinger since it's only based on melee. Next up in the Draconic Power, we are using Ferocious Leap for our front bar ultimate. This is a kind of cheap ultimate. You deal about 9k flame damage, you knock everybody back and stun them for 2 seconds, and then afterwards you gain a shield that absorbs 56,000 health for 6 seconds. That is a massive damage shield. On the back bar in the Restoration Staff tree, we are using Rapid Regeneration. Even though we're not built out as a healer, this still does a decent amount of healing. We're getting 13.5k health over 5 seconds, so it is nice for a little burst. Next up in the Fish Stick order, we are using Introspection. This is a flex spot. A lot of you guys may not want to farm all the way down here. It is a very painful DLC to get this. So you could do something else that will give you more healing or resources back. You could also boost your damage using Molten Weapons or get another heal like Searing Strike. I don't use this that often, but occasionally I really need to restore my stamina, but I'm also taking a beating, so I'll activate this. You heal for 2k health and restore 1500 magicka and stamina every second. While you maintain this, the health restored increases by 10% up to 50% every tick. Next up in the Draconic Power line, we're using Volatile Armor. You could use the other morph of this. This would give you a smaller damage shield, but in PvP it's already a small damage shield and then it's halved, so I don't prefer that. I'd rather just do a bit of damage. This gives us Major Resolve for 20 seconds, increasing our resistances by 6k. And then you also release a spray of spikes that deals about 7.5k magic damage over 10 seconds. That's the part where you would gain a shield on the other morph. But while this is active, the armor returns 469 magic damage to any enemy that uses a direct damage attack against you in melee range. This is also where if you pull in enemies, that will help reflect more damage, and that damage scales off of resistances. It's a bit difficult to get all these scalings. This is off resistance, Thews of Harbinger is based off of health, Radiant Bastion's based on the damage we're taking in, same with the Bone Shield, so there's a lot of scaling that we can't get a lot of, so it might be better to just do one of these. But I liked to just kind of throw them all together and have fun with this build. But like I said, you might be better off just focusing on one set and really boost the crap out of it. Next up in the support tree, we are using Efficient Purge. This is just that way if we get a lot of negative effects on us, we can purge for 5k magicka and it will remove up to 3 negative effects immediately to us and our group. Next up in Ardent Flame, we are using Noxious Breath. This is a stamina conal attack that does 3.5k poison damage up front and about 7k poison damage over 14 seconds. We're not using this for the damage, we are using this to get major breach to reduce the enemy's resistances by 6k. If we reduce the enemy's resistances, the reflection that we're doing should do more back to them. For our ultimate in the Ardent Flame, we are using the standard of Might. Enemies may not want to stand in this, so they might move out of it when you proc this, but it will help us survive, and we could still reflect projectiles that are launched at us. But when this is active, you deal 2.4k flame damage every second for 20 seconds to enemies and applying major defile to them, reducing their healing received and health recovery by 16%. When I'm in the area, it increases my damage done and reduces my damage taken by 15%. An ally can also synergize and deal 5.4k flame damage to all enemies in the area and immobilize them for 5 seconds. It is a very expensive ultimate though, so you want to time this right depending on the battle. Now into the CP. Now because this is in a more PvP build, there are a couple things that are nice for passives that you might want to focus on, such as breakfall to reduce your fall damage taken by 35%. You also might want to reduce your sneak radius, the movement speed penalty of sneak, by 25% as well, depending on what you're doing in PvP. The main things I am using is Treasure Hunter, that is more for PvE stuff, but Gifted Rider and War Mount helps with your mount movement, which will affect you in PvP quite often. And then I also increase the movement speed of my person by 20% when I'm outside of combat. In the blue tree, we want to go into Staving Death and we want to get Resilience. This will increase our crit resist by 660, so that way we don't get crit as often. I also want to get Ironclad because a lot of the reflection we need is based on direct damage, which is also a lot of the damage that people do in PvP. We want to come down here and get Bulwark. While you have a shield or Frost Staff equipped, we only have a shield, it increases our resistance by another 2k. Then we want to come down here and we want to get Cutting Defense. I will deal 900 magic damage to attackers whenever they hit me with a direct damage attack within 7 meters. That's another reason why we want to pull them in. This attack scales off of our resistances and it can proc our weapon enchants and poisons. None of these things have cooldowns, so if you have multiple people attacking you, all of our reflections will continuously attack them. And if they're attacking rapidly, we'll be hitting them rapidly. Riposte used to be a reflect. Now it increases our damage done when we activate a skill after we block, so that is kind of sad. Over into the red tree, we are getting Fortified for more armor, Boundless Vitality for more health. I love Slippery. Breaking free automatically for no cost is amazing, and you need to break free quite often. You might also want to take Expert Evasion for more roll dodging. Since we are in heavy armor, roll dodge is very expensive. Or you might want to do something involving crowd control immunity. There's a lot of options here. I'm coming up to here to get Bastions, that way I can increase the damage shield effectiveness that I am using from our bone shield. You also might want to get Sustained by Suffering. This will increase our recoveries by 150 while under the effects of a negative effect. In that case, you may not want to purge. Now for the passives. I'm only going to go over the passives that really affect this build. All passes will affect your build in some way, but some are not as important as others. You're going to want to get the Combustion passive. We don't do a lot of damage from our skills. It's all based on reflect, but there are some flame and poison attacks that we do, so you can restore magicka and poison every 3 seconds, which is nice when you apply those status effects. You are going to want to get Searing Heat. Any of the DOTs that we have, the damage will be increased by 33% and the duration by 4 seconds. World and Ruin isn't massive, but it will help our damage reflection. Iron Skin is going to be very important since we do need to block, and blocking will help us survive in PvP. Burning Heart is also very nice. We will have a Draconic Power active at all times, so our healing received will be increased by another 12%. Elder Guardian is very nice. We get 15% extra health recovery, and it increases our melee attacks by 2 meters. Scaled Armor is also very nice to increase our resistances by another 1650. In the Earth and Heart, we want to get Battle Roar. Every time you cast any ultimate, you gain resources back for each point of the ultimate's cost. So if you're running low on resources, that's why I love using our Ferocious Leap. If I'm low on health, magicka, stamina, whatever, I pop this. It's a fairly cheap ultimate. You not only knock everybody back, stun them, but you also gain that damage shield, and you heal underneath of that damage shield. So this kind of just puts you right back into the fight and revitalizes you. If you end up using an Earth and Heart ability, I would recommend getting Mountain Blessing so you can get minor brutality to your entire group. In the one hand and shield line, we will want to get Fortress. This will help us reduce our cost of blocking, which is the main thing we're going to be doing. We also want to get Sword and Board so we can reduce the amount of damage we block even further. Deadly Bash is very nice, so we might need to bash in PvP, and this will reduce the cost and deal extra damage. Deflect Bolts will also be nice, that way we can reduce damage from projectiles and ranged attacks by 14%. And that's on top of the 50% that we get from our Dragon Fire skill. And then Battlefield Mobility will help us move faster while we're blocking. In the Restoration tree, I've never really needed to heavy attack to get magicka back, but if you do, you can end up getting a lot more healing done. Cycle of Life would also help you get more magicka back on your heavy attacks. And then Restoration Master will just help you heal even further with Restoration Staff spells. Since we are full heavy, you are going to want to get every single passive in the heavy line tree. This will give us even more resistances, this will give us health recovery and restore resources when we take damage. Increases our max health by 14%, increases the amount of resources we restore when we heavy attack, and increases our healing received by 7%. Since we are using a Fighters Guild ability, you might want to get Banish the Wicked. I don't expect us to fully kill people, especially if you have actual DPS that you're fighting with, but since we are reflecting things, we can end up killing stuff, so you could generate some ultimate, and you might want to increase your weapon damage as well. If you use the fish stick order, I would recommend getting Spell Orb since we'd be casting this while in combat. Concentrated Barrier is also nice. If you are bracing on the back bar, you get a little damage shield. And then Deliberation is very nice, that way while we're channeling that skill, it reduces our damage taken by 30%. That's a non-named mitigation, so that can stack with other stuff. Now we are an Imperial. This does give us 1% more gold. We get 2k more max health, 2k more max stam, and reduces the cost of all our abilities by 6%. This is very nice, especially since we have a couple very expensive skills. And then in the alchemy line, get medicinal use. This will allow your potions to have 100% uptime, so that way you can keep those buffs running. Now, like I said, all of this reflection has two problems. It's based on the damage done. There's only two things that are based on our stats though. Dragon Fire Scale will for sure do 4k. That is based on our stats, not based on how much they hit us for. Volatile Armor is based on our stats, not how much they hit us for. Harbinger is also based on our stats. So it might be better to focus on increasing those stats if you are doing PvE. In PvP, this should all just hurt. Radiant Bastion will also be doing a lot of the stuff in PvP, assuming they hit us hard. Now, because this is all focused on us taking damage, I am just here where there's a lot of ads. Now, these guys don't really hit us hard, so we won't reflect that much. But at the same time, when I tried doing vet content, they have like 200k health, so it was not doing a lot. But I'll just sit here, so we want to keep our buffs up. Now we have two things that are based on when we block, so just from blocking here, we're doing quite a bit of damage. But as you see, we're out of stamina. I finally figured out how to get add-ons onto PTS, so this will help us show off how our DPS is and everything. So we can see here, Thews of Harbinger does do the most. Radiant Bastion barely did anything. It only did 700 damage, whereas Thews of Harbinger did almost 50,000 damage. This is currently the highest amount of damage we're getting from this build, but I think that is because they're not doing a lot of damage to us. The more damage we start taking, I feel like Radiant Bastion will start to expand further. Same with the Spiked Bone Shield. Both of these are based on the damage we take, whereas Volatile Armor and Thieves of Harbinger is a flat rate. So as you can see, on average, we're doing about this amount of damage, which is not that bad. As you can see, our actual resistances get up to about 38k when we get everything procced. Now, what we need to remember is keep Green Dragon Blood up. You're gonna wanna keep your Minor Heroism up. You wanna keep your Volatile Armor up. Keep your Bone Shield up. That will do the majority of a damage when they're doing a lot of stuff. That there, you can see I'm reflecting those projectiles back. If I start taking a lot of damage, you can use the Pixie Dust to gain some more healing if you need. I'm gonna make some more people mad over here. Now, that is another thing, is the more people I'm trying to block, the more issues I'm gonna start having as far as resource on my stamina. But that also does us more reflection. But I could just sit here with Bone Shield and constantly keep that up, and that will do a lot of our reflection for us. But as you can see, the only time I'm actually hitting them is when I do the low slash, or if I need to heavy attack to get resources back. So all this is just based on our reflecting, but the blocking is the biggest issue. You could swap out the impen to reduce the cost of blocking, but you won't have a lot of crit resist, so you might want to change up depending on how you're playing this. This does do an okay amount of damage. We are not going to be a full DPS, but we are a full tank though, so we can survive, but we also can do a bit of damage. As you can see, we're doing about 5.4k DPS, which isn't a lot, but that's also with us not really doing anything. So this Volatile Armor here, I believe, is the DOT. This is the actual reflect, so we're not getting a lot of reflect here. And as you can see here, Radiant Bastion barely did anything. Now the difficulty with PTS is it's difficult to get PvP videos on PTS since there's not as many players, and I feel like since there is no cooldown on any of these things, this would also work in a large group. So sadly, I will not be able to really show this how I'd like. Eventually, once I get enough characters leveled out on my real account, then I will try to start make some of these PvP builds on my actual account, and then we can get some footage of how these builds actually perform. But in the meantime, we can at least see how we survive. So I'm going to go into Vet Skullcrawler Peak. If you guys can't tell, that's my favorite dungeon, but in here we will take a lot of damage. I'm not going to stand in the AoEs, however. We don't have enough healing directly from ourselves, and those things end up doing about 57,000 damage per tick, which is how much health we have. So I'm not going to stand in that. But we do have enough healing and warding that the ads will not be able to even get to our health. So it's the Elder Ogres that I really have a problem with. Now in PvP, people tend to run very heavy resistances, so I'm not going to, this is the AoE I want to stay out of, so I'm not going to breach these enemies, so that way they're all at about 18,000 resistance. As you can see, our stam still always will have problems. If you're using this in a PvE scenario, I would definitely replace the impen with something like Sturdy, or get enchants that will reduce the cost of your blocking. But that will be the main issue we have. I will end up using my ulti so that way I can gain like resources back. Now this doesn't look like we're doing a lot of damage, but you got to take in mind these wolves have 191,000 health naturally. So even though we don't look like we're doing a lot of damage, we actually are. Once we die here, we can see on my combat metrics, look at how much we're doing. But I mean, I'll just stand in this. Like, you can see that AoE hurts a lot. But as you saw there, the green blood does less and less the more I spam it. So you don't really want to be using that when you're high health. That's where the pixie dust can come in and really help you survive. Keep using your ulti to gain your resources back up. As you can see, we are slowly killing these fools, and sometimes we do okay damage. Like, I think I saw almost a 10k proc somewhere. It's probably off a bone shield. But you just want to keep all your buffs up to make sure you're surviving. Stamina is always going to be our biggest problem. I never really run out of magicka unless I'm spamming our heals. But in that case, you want to do a green blood and then an occasional pixie dust. I mean, even the imps have 136,000 health, and then the frickin' elder is almost 600,000, so we're never really gonna have enough DPS to really show how well this works, but it is working very slowly. But that's the entire point. We're not really doing anything, so you could pair this up with some actual DPS skills rather than survival stuff. I would probably replace, since we can't see Radiant doing a lot of damage, since it's barely been doing anything, I would probably replace Radiant with something that will help out our other stuff. So Fuse is based on max health. You might want to increase your max health with Plague Doctor. Radiant will be best when you're doing PvP where they actually hit hard though. So this was the entire fight here. This is the DPS that they were doing to me. So they're not doing a lot of attacking. As you see on this side here, Fuse of Harbinger still very much in the lead. The Dragon Fire skill actually moved upwards, but that's because we had two imps that were doing attack damage, and this can occur every half second. Cutting Defense is actually up next, which is our CP star, so this is actually starting to do a decent amount. And then Bone Shield, and then all the way down here is Radiant Bastion. So it didn't even do 1% of the damage. This is not that great. In total, it didn't even hit 5k damage, but I feel like that's just because they're not doing a lot of damage. If we look at our damage received, the Elder Ogre did do a lot, but that is just because of his Glacial Winds, which do a lot of damage. If we were looking at the wolves, who I feel like we're doing the most, on average, they're only hitting for 2,700. Radiant does 10% of damage. That is not a lot, but if you look in PvP, people will have hits that are like 20k, so it is a lot more. So that is where I feel Radiant Bastion will really boost upwards. If you're dealing with low numbers, then stuff that is based on our stats, such as Thieves of Harbinger, will be better off. So guys, I was really excited for this build. I feel like if I actually get this in PvP on the real server sometime in the future, it'll be a really fun build, just standing there and they take the damage that I'm taking. It is definitely not as strong as I would have liked, but I think that's just because they're not hitting me for a lot. If you're doing PvE, I think this might be viable for doing a little bit of damage as a tank if you only focused on one set. Thieves of Harbinger being the best one out of all this stuff definitely seems like if you increase your health even further, you might be able to get some pretty decent numbers off of that thing. The only issue is it is based on when you block, so you will need to make sure you're blocking constantly. Now let's go check out how this samurai is put together. For the helmet, we are using the Heavy Honor Guard helm. For the breastplate, we are using the Heavy Imperial Cuirass 3. For the shoulders, we are using the Heavy Akaviri Pauldrons. For the hands, we are using Heavy Soul Shriven Gauntlets. For the waist, we are using Heavy Greymoor Girdle. For the legs, we are using Heavy Moongrave Fane Greaves. For the feet, we are using the Prophet Sandals. For the sword, we are using the Seiski Sword. For the shield, we are using the Pyandonian Shield. For the staff, we are using the horned dragon staff. For the whitish gray color, we are using the volunteer's iron. Except for the helmet, which we had to use Boethia's gray to make it a bit darker. And then for the red, we are using red diamond red. Now I'll go over the color patterns for you guys. Yeah guys, I think this build has some serious potential. If you get those stats higher in PvE, this could also work, but I feel like this is definitely more set off for PvP. And since you can also increase your health even further, then the Thews of Arbinger should be much better in PvP as well. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe if you guys want to see more of this content. I also do some Destiny 2, God of War, Minecraft. I've been playing Scum in the background. Let me know if you guys want to see me play that. But like and subscribe to join the VENOM Syndicate and help our community and channel grow. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys next time.